Today, we're going to talk about how AI could save education. And I wanted to kind of spark our conversation today with a video from C.A.L about some of the things they're doing at Khan Academy to help students learn. And maybe we can use that to kind of think about how we can utilize AI to help our students as well. So the first thing, let's go ahead and let's just get a quick poll. And in this poll, when I said to Fatima, I wanted to have two polls. I wanted to have one, anybody who's done a flipped classroom knows you have these things called reading quizzes at the beginning to make sure the students have actually covered the material. So I was going to have one that was going to ask you about your feelings on AI. And then a little bit later on, I was going to quiz you on whether or not you had watched the video. But you'll have both of those there now, and I'll be able to see how you've done. And then we'll come back to that. So let me see if I can get the poll started here. Let's see. And so you should see 4 questions there. Just go ahead and answer those 4 questions quickly. Okay, give another 30 seconds or so. All right, I'll end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm just going to look at the results here. I'm not going to share them just yet. All right. All right, so it looks like we need to build some confidence in using AI, and that's good. We're at the beginning of that. I always laugh at the few people who say they never touched the stuff. And then let me look and see how you did on your reading quiz. Okay, so all right. All right, so we got a little work to do, but that's okay. It's all right. All right. So I'll start by saying that I am really bullish on all of this stuff around AI. And it is my hope that by the end of our time together today, that if you aren't bullish, that you're closer to bullish than you aren't on all of the exciting things we can do in education if we start to think about how AI will change that. And so this first image that I generated from ChatGPT, I asked it to generate an image of a factory at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, so sometime around 1900. And so the question that I want you to kind of think about is, how were these people thinking about the future? And what were the people who were being disrupted by this idea of assembly lines and factories? What were they thinking about in terms of holding on to things that they found to be dear, which may have been the things that were driving their economic successes, right? And so this is where we are now in terms of AI. We are literally at the beginning of what is the equivalent of an industrial revolution. And so the question is, would those people back in 1900 ever thought that this is what the world would have looked like in 2024? And if they did, how might they have thought about things differently in terms of innovations and changes that needed to be made so that this could actually come to fruition? Again, would they have ever thought that there would be something like this? I put this up because it's a beautiful building, but I also put this up because of what Apple means to us on the planet Earth now. Would they ever been able to conceive of what happened after Apple developed an iPod and how that changed how we communicate and how we connect with each other? And then the question is, now we're sitting here in 2024, halfway to 2025. What do we think we need to be doing for this future that would be 100 years from now? And what kinds of things do our students need to be prepared to do so that when they're in the places that we are 30 or 40 years from now, how are they going to be prepared to interact with the things that are going on and actually be leaders in that new world? So we want to keep that in mind as we go through this presentation, as we think about how we might be integrating these things. To kind of drive that home, if you think about when the automobile came about, Henry Ford, 1905, 06, whatever it may be, what do you think the people who sold horses were thinking? I'm sure there was somebody who was saying, you know, this new automobile came about, but people are always going to have to know how to ride a horse. People were making wagon wheels. Oh, this new automobile is coming about, but people are always going to have wagon wheels, right? Holding on to things that were going to go away because of this disruption. Here's another one, the cell phone. I have had conversations with my father, who's about 75 years old, in the past decade, where he was still telling me everybody needs a landline phone. And please don't do what he did a month ago and say, oh, when the phones went down. Yeah, the phones may go down, but the idea that having a landline phone, I would, is there anybody, please raise your virtual hand on the call who has a landline phone that you put in your house? Maybe you bought a house and it was there, but did anybody go and put a landline phone? I got one. There we go. And then I got a smile, right? So landline phones are kind of a thing of the past. And then this idea of a desktop computer. Um, you can imagine that when people start saying, hey, we're going to start using computers, there was somebody who was saying, oh, but you know, we need to write everything down on a piece of paper and put it in a file cabinet because you just never know, those computers might lose things. And so every time a new technology comes into play, the people who are going to be impacted by it most are always going to fight against it. And then it always comes whether or not people want it to or not. At this point, I imagine there's nobody who has said, I don't want a desktop computer. Everywhere you go, there's a computer, and that's just an accepted thing. Everyone has, you know, a cell phone. And of course, we all have cars for the most part. This thing revolutionized calculus instruction. I know everybody on the call, Fatma, today is very, very young, but I was actually taking calculus in the mid 80s. And in the mid 80s, when I was taking calculus, there were no graphing calculators that were available to students. I'm sure that they were in development, they were somewhere in a lab. And we spent a third of our semester in a Calculus 1 course just learning how to graph functions. How do you use all these calculus concepts to get from a pencil to a piece of paper and graph all these beautiful and intricate functions? When I went to grad school in the early 90s, there were graphing calculators. And what we were doing then is we were teaching students how to use the graphing calculators so that they could visualize all these functions. They could visualize them faster. They could visualize things that would have been more difficult than they could have actually drawn. And that was the change that came about from the graphing calculator. Believe it or not, and I had one person who's already indicated that they're a math person as well. There's still faculty members who are teaching Calculus 1, spending a third of the course teaching graphing techniques. That's holding on to a vestige that may not need to be preserved. And that's what we want to really think about. How do we do the things like take the calculator and help students use that calculator so they can move on and start thinking about more difficult, complicated, challenging problems that they can solve? So everybody's heard about Chat GPT, and that just stands for Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And so the last time I checked, and I kind of stopped, I think I've probably done a version of this workshop 3 or 4 times since November of 2022. And I just stopped looking because I don't think it's important anymore. But currently, I think there are more than 180 million users. That goes up and down because some people jump in and jump out. But that's a lot of people who are on there. And to give you some context, that I guess ChatGPT came out in November 2022, it's 2 years or so, 2.5 years. It took a year for Instagram to get to 10 million users. And Instagram is kind of the crack of a mobile device, right? Nobody can live without Instagram. So it just gives you an idea of how popular it is. And then the other thing that happened, and I know you all probably saw this in the beginning, is that Microsoft and Google have invested billions of dollars into OpenAI. And OpenAI is just the group that is doing all of the programming, the development for ChatGPT, but you're probably starting to notice that a lot of those kind of AI things are being integrated into Microsoft products. There's all this Copilot that's there, that's in all the Microsoft products if you pay for it. It's replaced Bing. And then there's Google, I think they call it Gemini now. It changed its name from Bard to Gemini. And it's all integrated in there. And you can only imagine that it's going to continue. And if you heard the news this week, and I'll talk a little bit about that moving forward, there's this new Chat GPT 4.0. And it is actually the driving force behind what Sal Khan was talking about. So there are a couple of ways we can approach artificial intelligence in education in our lives. So we could ban it. And in the beginning, lots of institutions kind of said, hey, we're just not going to allow students to use AI at all on this campus and kind of get that integrated into your dishonesty policies and, jeopardizing whether or not you're going to kick students out of school and those other things. We could bury it, which means that we would kind of say, well, I'm just going to pretend like there's no such thing as AI, and I'm just going to keep teaching the way I've been teaching, and whatever happens, happens. And then the last thing we could do is we could embrace it. And this is where I think we really ought to be having our conversations around how do we embrace it now? And what does embracing it look like in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And so I talked a little bit about Chat GPT, and you all are aware that in November 2022, we got this Chat GPT 3.5. That's still available and it's completely free. There's a Chat GPT 4, which is a paid version. It's $20 a month. If you don't have that paid version, it is well worth your $20 a month. $20 a month is what we pay for Netflix, Hulu, those other things. It is well worth it for you to go ahead and get a subscription to this one or one of the other ones so that you can get all of the features and you can experience that. And then, as I mentioned, there's new Chat GPT 4.0, and the O just stands for Omni. And this is groundbreaking. I've been playing around with it this week. I've been watching some of the video demonstrations on the internet. You can actually interact with this AI, so you can talk to it, you ask it questions. It can interact with other AIs. So there's a demonstration on the internet where there's a cell phone, two cell phones. There are two different AIs. One of the cell phones has a camera on and acts as the eyes, and the other cell phone asks the second cell phone questions about the environment, and they share that information, and then they make songs and all kinds of things from that information. So it's going to be really exciting. The other thing that's embedded in that Chat GPT 4.0 is that a student can actually take an image of something that's on their screen and it will interact with them. So for example, they could be working on a math problem and it will provide tutorial services to help the student learn and understand how to move through that math problem, depending on what they do and providing feedback. So who else is out there? And so there's Poe. And as I go through them, maybe just give a thumbs up if you've heard of these before. So there's Poe, and it's Poe.com. And it actually has many AIs built in. There might be hundreds of them. So you can find AIs there that will create music, that will do slide presentations, that will create images. So it's kind of a place where you get an account and then you have access to many different AIs. Claude is one of the AIs that's embedded in Poe, and you can also get access to that independently. And it's very much like ChatGPT. Gemini is connected to your Google accounts. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. The one thing that always gives me a little pause is that when you have your Gmail accounts that you all have, and then you have something that's connected to that, we know that Google is going through everything that we share, and it's kind of utilizing that. So I'm not as comfortable with that one as I am with some of the others. But one workaround is that you could create a Gmail account that was specifically for that use, and so it wouldn't have access to everything that you may have on your Google Drive. Copilot is another huge one. They have individual and enterprise accounts. So some institutions are purchasing the enterprise account, and then you would have a Copilot feature in all of your Microsoft products. So Outlook, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, you just have a button you could click on that and it would give you all of the AI suggestions for whatever you're doing. It also allows you to go to what used to be Bing, and you can sign in using the credentials from your institution if they have bought some version of that enterprise account. And then it walls off that information. So for example, you could have things that you're working on in the office that are kind of proprietary to the institution. You could share those in Copilot. It could give you AI feedback, but it would not allow that data to go out to the world at large as part of its database. So it will wall off those things if you're in an enterprise account. If you aren't, then you can still access it. And then they have some limits. So they give you some tokens. And once you use up a certain amount of tokens, they kind of restrict you for 24 hours. But it's available to anyone who wants to go to that website. And let me just take a moment here because I have links to all of those. So I'm going to drop those in the chat for you. So that you can go and check them out. So what are these things? So they're what are called large language models, and you might hear people refer to them as LLMs, and they work on this idea from mathematics called neural networks. And it's just really machine learning. So it's the machine's ability to figure out or to predict what the next thing should be. And the way these large language models work is that they're really only predicting the next word. So they have a bunch of data. You ask it something and it starts, as it's writing it, it starts to predict based upon all the data it has what would be the next word that would come after. So it's very interesting because you get this feeling if you interact with, an AI like ChatGPT that it's thinking, but it's really not thinking, it's just predicting the next words. And it does a really good job of doing that. These things are powered by large amounts of data. So in the beginning, things like ChatGPT would have this data dump that was done at a particular time, and then it would know everything up to that particular time, and it can make predictions about things that you wanted using that data. I think that ChatGPT's last knowledge update was December 2023, so not too long ago. But now a lot of these AIs have access to the internet. So ChatGPT-4 accesses Bing, and so you can ask it some of the more up-to-date things, and it can give you responses. And of course, things like Copilot have access to that as well. Get back. There we go. So what are some of the rules of engagement with AI? Well, the first thing you need to realize is that your data feeds the beast. It really is depending on these large data dumps that it receives, along with its ability to crawl the internet to get information. And so if you think about it, whatever you put in, it's in there. I mean, you can't get it back out. So if you're updating your CV and you're putting, your address and your social security number and all those things into the AI, it's possible that those pieces of information could pop out in somebody else's AI retrieval of something. So you always want to be very conscious of what you're putting in. And of course, we're talking about this in terms of, education. So we want to make sure our students understand that as well. The other thing that you all have heard about are AI hallucinations. And so it will make things up from time to time, and it never makes them up with the caveat of, hey, I tried my best, but I'm not sure. It tells you the information. It gives you a response and acts like it's the gospel. So this is something that we need our students to really understand. That is, how do they evaluate the information that they're getting back from AI? Of course, as we move forward, it's going to get better and better. And it's much better now than it was 2 years ago, but it's still an issue that the AI is going to try to come up with something in response to what you've asked, and it's always going to sound like it is the absolute truth. So we need to evaluate all those responses. And then there's a great article that was in the Chronicle of Higher Education. I think I have a link for that, so I'm going to drop that in the chat. And it's from an English professor who talked about the difficulty, the challenge of trying to determine when students have used AI in writing. And so there are a couple of obvious things that can happen. You could get a paper from Desi that all of a sudden was so much better than anything I'd ever written, you'd be thinking, oh my God, where did he get this from? So that's certainly a possibility. That's an extreme. The other thing that I've heard from several faculty members is that you could get a paper from Desi that does not address the prompt at all, where I put something in and because I didn't understand the prompt, it's giving me something that doesn't make any sense. Or I literally just have a response, some sort of essay that is not connected to anything that we're doing. So those would be the extremes. But what this author says is that because of the way AI works, and that is it's predicting the next word, it's taking that from all of the data that's been put in. So it's kind of doing this smoothing. So everything that it writes is kind of C plus-ish, right? Which is pretty good. And so it's very difficult if a student doesn't violate one of those first two things to really determine whether or not a student has written it or whether or not the AI has written it. And I think that that should inform some of the things that we are starting to ask students to do. Because first of all, for most things, and if I ask you all, thumbs up, if you use AI, how many people use it to help them craft an email or anything else that they're writing for work? Yeah, I see everybody. I would be shocked that if there's anybody who has used any kind of AI hasn't tried it with the old, hey, help me write this email. And for emails, it's like it's really, really good because an email, you want to make sure that you convey whatever it is you're trying to convey. It's really good at that. You want to make sure it has the right tone, right? You don't want it in all caps because people think that you're yelling at them. And you want it to be kind of concise and grammatically correct. And so AI is going to do a great job at that. As a matter of fact, it has made me a much better email writer. Now, I'm giving it away because if anybody emails me now, you're going to know that I use AI to respond to you. But it makes me a much better email writer because it catches all those things where you send an email, oh my gosh, I forgot a word or I misspelled there, or all those other things. It gets all that right for us. So in regard to like most writing, that's going to be pretty good. If you're writing for a class, and if you're writing somewhere in the C plus range, it's pretty much gonna be passable, and it's not gonna send up many red flags. So we need to be thinking about that in terms of like, what do we want students to write, and what are the real things that they should be paying attention to in terms of writing. If there's going to be a tool out there that's going to write things pretty well for them, if they give them all the information that's needed. All right, we don't have to have the video quiz because you all took it. And so the first question was, what is the name of the Khan Academy assistant? And the second question was, how much can student performance be improved by one-on-one tutoring? And so the name of the assistant was Conmigo. And Sal Khan in that video talks about the 2 Sigma problem. I'm going to stop just for a second. I'd love to hear from you all. What did you all think about that video? What did it get any juices flowing?
Hi, this is Catherine Patterson or Kit Patterson.
Okay.
I thought it was, oh, sorry, let me undo my video. I thought it was a great video. I really liked that Conmigo had kind of, like he said, guardrails. So if a student, for example, tried to say, give me the answer to this, reading through a text, Conmigo would come back and say, well, I'm just a tutor, so I can't do that. However, why don't you, let me ask you this, and then follow up with a question to guide the reading. I thought that was brilliant. And if we can use that kind of thing with students in higher ed, I think it will be really beneficial. Everyone having that 2 Sigma gain in learning. So
Yeah, awesome. Is it Helene?
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
go ahead, please.
Hi. Yeah, I kind of took a great deal of comfort in that video because I've been really skeptical and scared of all of the AI stuff. I'm one of those Luddites who has well, I have a lot of old things in my house because I do kind of feel like, you never know. But what I took comfort in was the idea of using it for tutoring, using it to help teacher prep. But it also gave me the idea of, we really have to level the playing field here because I hate to think, I'm an English teacher, and I hate to think there are some students who have great knowledge of this and others who are really struggling through to honestly learn these skills. And it's kind of not feeling very fair to be grading them when they don't all have the same tools at their disposal. So there's, yeah.
Excellent. Love it. Got time for one more comment? Anybody else? All right, good. Yeah, so I think you all captured it all. That it's like this idea of the one-on-one tutoring. He said it's based on Chat GPT 4, and what it sounds like to me, because that video came, I think I first saw that TED Talk back in January or somewhere, that he was able to get access to what is now the Chat GPT 4.0 because it does exactly the same types of things. And then he talks in there about this 2 sigma problem that came from Bloom's. And if you think about it, so if you have conventional instruction about a 1 to 30 ratio of faculty to students, that you have a bell curve for the most part. If you do something like mastery learning and you got the same ratio, you might be able to move the students 1 sigma. But of course, if you had one-on-one tutoring, you could move the students 2 sigma. And he was very kind. For us, 2 sigma would mean you move a C student to an A. I think he said you move an average student to exceptional, but you can move a C student to an A, you can move a D student to a B, and that would be extremely impactful. There's only one problem. It's the economy of scale. Like we can't one-on-one teach college students. We have 9,000 students at FAMU. You all have 3,500 or so at UDC. So the question is, what can we use? And that's why he stated it as a problem. What could we use to get us close to that? And what Sal Khan is saying, and I think is what it's looking like, is that with this introduction of AI, which turns out to be like this excellent teaching assistant, we will get to a place where students will be able to get the one-on-one tutoring that they may need so that we could actually see these kinds of gains. And what I really liked about the videos, it talked about the positive possibilities as opposed to the fearful things that we all are quite honestly seeing sometimes with students who are interacting with AI now, and those things that we also are conjuring in our minds about what might happen to us and to them if they don't utilize the technology properly. So I think we talked about that a little bit. Is there somebody out there who's using AI for something other than maybe helping them write or other things? I'd love to hear what are some ways that you might be using AI.
I can speak.
Sure.
Hi, welcome. My name is Beverly Lucas, and I am a PhD student, and I was taking an advanced quantitative course, and I used Julius AI. And I think it was so helpful to me because it really helped me to learn how to interpret the data in statistics. So it was very helpful. So I still, even though the class is over and I did get an A, I kept my subscription.
Good. Julian?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Julian King. I'm one of our instructional designers here on the C.A.L team. So I use AI when it comes to rubric creation. Sometimes you're trying to figure out how to create criterion for a rubric that's measurable, that's impactful, but that's also data that you can track through the system. And especially as it's time to get a lot of our courses certified for online learning and distance learning, using that to create these rubric criterions has really been very helpful in my opinion.
Excellent. Richard, go ahead.
Yes, I have used it as an assignment in my language acquisition course. And so towards the end of a unit where we've been looking at how language is acquired and the theories, principles, and processes, I've had them engage AI in that process, asking AI how language is acquired and having a back and forth, challenging AI. As you said, AI can be confidently wrong,
Right.
and particularly bringing in issues of diversity, equity within that discussion. So that's been very interesting because they can play the experts as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so on the flip side, how do you think students are using AI without some of the direction that some of you all have mentioned here that you may be giving them? If you just leave students to their own devices, how do you think they're using AI?
Well, I'll speak on this as well. From the faculty side, I've seen that certain discussion prompts or certain reflection journals you may give students, that they may originally start writing it in their language and then put it in Chat GPT to kind of refine it, and they kind of take exactly what's in Chat GPT and paste it in that space. So you're kind of being able to see them, use the tool, but they're not necessarily being educated on how to use it properly or ethically.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. I saw someone else said in the chat, discussion prompts. Anyone else? No. Okay. I'm shocked because, I heard just a little bit, but maybe UDC is different than everywhere else. But, everybody around here says that students are using it to, and I'll put it in quotes, to do all kinds of cheating, right? That they are, they're out there and it's a wild, wild west for them. I see Beverly's hand goes up.
Yeah, that was going to be my answer. I was going to say that they're using it incorrectly. So they are doing what Julian just said, the cut and the paste. And I teach college composition, so I see it a lot.
I bet. Tony, you had your hand up as well?
Oh, no, high schoolers, my kid is in high school and he says, even though his school does not allow for them to use it, the students are using it for brainstorming or just getting ideas. They have an end of semester exam and he used it to create an outline for the particular, because it's called Modern European History. So he got the topical list because he didn't have that on a syllabus or anything in a high school class. So he got that for himself and shared it with his peers.
So, and what I hear often is that if it's either put in a closet and hidden away and you're telling students not to use it, or you're not talking to them about it, students will do almost anything, right? There might be some students who are really trying to find the easiest way out. There's some students who are trying to use it correctly, but just don't quite know how. I've heard some of you all say that. And so that's where we come in. We come in and trying to think about how we can redesign what we're doing in our courses so that we incorporate AI and we teach students how to use it so that it's most effective. We teach them how to use it so that it's ethical. We teach them how to use it so that they're prepared for the future. That is really the whole idea. All right, so I was going to put you all in breakout rooms, but you all seem to be very good at speaking out. So let's just kind of address, and I have 4 questions that we'll address very quickly in about 5 minutes. So what concerns you most about integrating AI into education, and what potential benefits of AI in education are you most optimistic about? Please go ahead.
Can we speak?
Yeah, please do.
My concerns, and I've worked at UDC for a while now, but I taught secondary math at high school level before this. And the calculator connection really hit home because there were a lot of instructors that just gave students calculators, and there were a lot of instructors that taught students how to use calculators. And my biggest concern is that with these new tools, students will be given these things, but not taught how to actively use it, how to use it properly, how to use it to better their skills, or we're just using it to coddle students or get students across the line. That's my biggest concern about a tool like this, because as we know, if it's used properly, it can help students jump from a grade level or jump 2 grade levels. But if used incorrectly, we're just putting a student further behind because they're just getting answers from this and they're never actually learning or mastering these skills.
No, definitely. Please go. I see some other hands. You all just jump on in.
I could piggyback on what Julian just said. I think what concerns me is, and Helen pointed this out as well, equal access to knowing how to use the tool, critically thinking through the use of the tool, that idea of ethical use of the tool and kind of optimal use for the individual. The idea of disparities in that space is really what concerns me.
All right, and I say, Helene, go ahead.
Yeah, but also nobody's mentioned that, although maybe it came up with the false confidence, the fact that, I'm kind of taking some comfort in your saying that things are getting better, but my understanding is there's a lot of false information out there. And that truly worries me, that the AI is going to look so good, so grammatical. That used to be the sign that something wasn't correct when the grammar was off. But now that the grammar is going to be perfect, there's going to be a lot of lies out there and false information. And students are going to be, hey, how are they going to tell? You know, how do they know when something is truly correct? And how can we teach them that? I mean, we've always been talking about information literacy and the idea of checking all your sources, but how's this going to happen when they're just going to put all their confidence in AI? And I don't even know how you do that. So that's my biggest concern. Just and you know, especially with elections coming up and all the false information that is most likely going to be out there and looking so perfect, so beautiful with images and all that. And how are we going to know what the real truth is?
You make an excellent point, and I would say that you hit the critical piece. The part that our students don't need to, and I should not say this because I don't want to get into discussion about how to teach English because that's not my specialty. It may be the case that we could trade off some of the grammar and other things that AI would be very, very good at. And then we could spend all that additional time on helping students learn how to evaluate what they're reading, because that's really the critical piece. How do you evaluate whether or not something is true or false, right? And this is the opportunity that we get in mathematics and physics and English, where we spend a lot of time teaching students how to do like the real fundamental things. And we could get to the things that are most important, because I think as one of the comments was, you know, the utilization of a calculator. If we're thinking about using a calculator to give it to a 6th or 7th grader that can't do basic mathematics to kind of get them over the hump, versus how an engineer might use a calculator to build a bridge or an airplane, we're missing the point. That we're training people to use calculators so they can build bridges and airplanes, not so that they can find a way to pass some sort of standardized test in the 5th grade. And that's really what we're thinking about in terms of AI. How do we get to those bigger things that are of most interest and that our students really need to know? Beverly, I see your hand. I see a lot of hands.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about what you were saying. My comment was going to be that what concerns me the most is that the students are being robbed the learning experience. So when we talk about fundamentals, because I am an English teacher, those fundamentals are important. So for me, because I teach remedial students, that is the big picture for me. And I think with the help of AI, they miss how those fundamentals put together the big picture. So it may not be that way when it comes to math, but when it comes to writing, when it comes to grammar, I don't know. It's just my opinion that the fundamentals are the big picture.
I think that you are right. And that's why I certainly, you know, I can't speak to what are the fundamental things that students may need to learn in a writing course. What I can challenge you with is that there used to be a time where students used to need to know how to spell words very well, because you were typing at a typewriter and there was nothing that was going to check your spelling. But now there's spell check. And so what we're always having to ask ourselves in all of our disciplines is, as technology is introduced, what becomes the fundamental things that students need to know how to do? That, you know, when the people who were doing mathematics and hidden figures were doing all that mathematics for NASA, they were called calculators because these were women who actually sat at a table and did the calculations with a pencil and piece of paper. No one would expect any mathematician to do that now. So what's happened is that the foundational knowledge that you need to know has been moved up because the technology does so much of that for us. So what we're doing is that we're individually in our own spaces having to decide, where have we moved because of the technology? And even better yet, because we're at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, where do we see that movement coming in the next 3, 4, 5 years? Because it's coming quickly. Because in November 2022, in October 2022, nobody knew what ChatGPT was. And now we all know what it is. So you can imagine what it's going to look like in 2 or 3 years from now when it's integrated in everything. I think I saw, let's see, Richard, your hand's been up for a while, and then I'll get William and Grady, and then we'll move on. I love it.
Yeah, I share the same concerns that Helen mentioned and Tony mentioned as well. And this is the idea that all these AIs are actually just crawling data, and there's good data, there's terrible data, and all of that. so that poses a challenge in terms of propagation or even reaffirmation of stereotypes, for example, through some of these systems. But I also think there's an advantage to that for us professors, in that it really puts us in a position where we are now indispensable, because you may have textbooks, you may have AI, but our students need somebody to guide them through the process, to sort of offer an interpretation, way of navigation. So I think this sort of, as opposed to weakening the need for us within the learning process, I think it really, really enhances and makes it necessary that we are at the center of that process.
That's awesome. You hit on two things that come up. First of all, we'll always be needed, provided we grow and change, right? So we'll always be needed. And the second question I'll ask, because I've heard many of you all say that there is misinformation out there now, that the whole point is that our students need to interact with large thoughts, groups of thought, and have to go through the process of figuring out what's real, what's right, what's reasonable. And so this gives them an opportunity to do that on a much larger scale than they normally would have been able to do. But I don't think that AI is not going to introduce any more misinformation than is already available. It's just an opportunity for students to learn how to utilize these kinds of tools so that they are not the purveyors of the misinformation. That's really the idea. So how do we teach them that? And we can get to that right away because AI pulls you there so quickly. I guess Finn and Grady, and then we'll move on.
So I think most of my points have been touched on a little bit now, but I'm really optimistic about this idea that we can generate so many quick examples and assignments where students can explain why AI made its decisions, like have the AI write a paper and then have the student assignment be grade that paper yourself or fact check that information from the AI written assignment. So I love that we can use it to kind of create those critical thinking assessment tools. But personally, I'm currently also a student in the mortuary science department, which is a very kind of specialized field. There's not a lot of professors, not a lot of academic writing. And from at least some of my classmates using some AI to try and ask questions in that field, it does have a lot of the kind of false information issues where, because it's a field that doesn't have a lot of online information that is, academically verified and all that, it does really get hit with a lot of this kind of data hallucination, false confidence.
Yeah, no doubt. Grady?
Thank you so much. So I am super optimistic about both OpenAI and generative AI. As a novice in this space, I'm so happy to hear you bring up Hidden Figures, because the thing that came to mind immediately for me was the evolution of education, and it also will highlight the disparities, especially for urban communities, and especially for like a university like UDC and even that of FAMU, the broadband gaps that exist, the needs for students to be able to have access to another resource, to another tool for learning.
Grady, I think we lost you, but I think I did get the gist of what you were saying. And that
the evolution of learning is speeding up at a much rapid pace. And OpenAI and generative AI is just another tool to help, to your point about the calculator, whether we're talking opportunity to say, okay, what communities have access to, I think someone brought, can you hear me now?
A little bit better, but it's going in and out a little bit, but I think we got the gist of it. And that is that this has,
sorry, and trying to be safe at the same time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
No, but education is speeding up. It's another amazing tool that we can.
Yep. Yep. I
Okay,
think, yep, we got you. Got you. So it's the evolution of education, but also there are
I'm
concerns.
done. I'm done. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's fine. There's also concerns in the spaces that we teach in around yet another thing that might be impacted by students not having access to broadband that they may need. And so that's certainly something that we need to think about as well. I'm going to move along. I know that Fatma, you said that I had until 3 o'clock. Is that what it is? We have until 3 o'clock this afternoon?
You have until I'm in a different time zone, so
I'm
kind
just
of
teasing you. We have about 10 more minutes. Just teasing. I'm gonna jump ahead to kind of talk to you about some of the ways that we can kind of mitigate this issue with AI giving us bad results. And it'll kind of lead us into my talk with you all next week when I'll actually be there at UDC, where we'll actually get our hands dirty and we'll play around with the AI and see some of the things. I know you all have probably heard a lot about this concept of prompt engineering. And so this is really just the way that you interact with the AI to get it to give you the results that you're looking for. And so there are several steps, and I am borrowing this from Philippa Hartman, who is an affiliate professor at Cambridge. And I'm going to drop her link in the chat so that you all can go and look at some of her materials, because she has a lot of great information on how to integrate AI into instruction. But the first thing that she suggests that we do is that you give your bot a role. And I'll show you an example. Your bot can be whatever you want it to be. It can get the information to be a brain surgeon, a professional baseball player, whatever you want it to be. So you give your bot a role first. Then you give your bot a specific task. So you tell it what you want it to do. And then you provide it some instructions. That'll be your third step. And then it's going to give you some feedback. And then you refine that. And I have never interacted with any of these AIs and gotten exactly what I wanted the first time. So you get something back, you evaluate it, and then you give it some additional instructions, and you continue to go through this process until you get something that you are pleased with. So as an example, you might give your bot a role and say, you are an expert university professor who specializes in teaching climate change for more than a decade. So I've given the bot a role. And then you say, write a lesson plan for a 1-hour course for freshmen using active learning pedagogy. And the instructions are, this is a first draft, so keep the lesson plan as short as possible using bullet points where possible. Present the lesson plan in a table format with the following columns: objective, resources, activity, and time frame. And so when you do that, I'm gonna drop those results in the chat. And I always know that when I do this, you all are going to stop paying attention to me, because everybody's going to click on that because they want to see what it did. And that's okay. You all can do that. And you can scan this QR code if you like on your phone, and you can pull it up with your iPad. And you'll see what the results are. But what you'll see is that it provided a table with those headings. It detailed how much time should be taken. It provided examples of different activities you could do in class. And then at the end, it even talks to you about how you could bring additional people into the class. It gives you all kinds of information that you could go back and revise. I've been teaching using active learning flipped classroom for 15 years, and there were some suggestions in there that I had not seen before. So it's an excellent way to generate ideas about how you want to do things. And you can do that and revise it as you need it. So just as be careful with these things out there like Chat GPT or GPT-0 or anything else that says it's detecting the utilization of AI. And I know that in a lot of LMSs, they have Turnitin has all kinds of features that can be used. Be careful with that. And it makes me just say, no, I changed my mind. Don't use them at all, because there are impacts on students who maybe don't have English as a first language. There are impacts on how things are structured, and it just doesn't do a good job at it at all. So sometimes it detects things that are actually AI generated. Sometimes it claims that things that aren't are. So let's stay away from those things and let's think about how we can kind of guide the way that our students are using AI. So one way you could guide them is you could say, well, we're only going to do assignments in class, because that would be AI proof, right? If we said, everybody take out a piece of paper and a pencil, put your devices away, write, do some math. They can't use AI in those circumstances. But of course, that is absolutely no fun at all. Nobody wants to instruct like that. So clearly state your policy. Whatever your policy is for the utilization of AI, if UDC is like FAMU is, we do not have a university policy. And I was just talking to our provost about this last week, and she and I both agree we don't want one, because the way that somebody might want to use AI as a faculty member in math might be very different than English, might be very different than biology. So we don't want to have a broad stroke, this is how you use AI. But individual faculty members or departments could decide on how they want to use AI and state that policy clearly. But then you want to think about, how do you integrate AI into assignments in a way that meets your learning objectives? Because the other thing, we don't want you all to just go out there and just start using AI willy-nilly in your classes. It needs to actually be connected in some kind of way to the things you actually want your students to be able to achieve. So one way that you could do is you have students write about topics that have only been discussed in class. So if I asked you all to write me a reflection on your experiences in this workshop today, AI is not going to do a good job at that. And next week, when we're playing around with the AI, I'm going to show you just how bad it's going to do. And as we talked about, it's going to hallucinate, because it will write some things and it will act like it's exactly what happened in here, and it will have nothing to do with it. So if you focus on something that the AI doesn't have the ability to generate, then your students will be forced to do that on their own. They can use it in the other ways if that's okay, and that is to refine their writing, but they won't be able to generate the reflection that I would want from this particular session. We talked about this before, but I want to drive it home. If you think about Bloom's taxonomy, in most of our classes, we spend a lot of time on those bottom three levels, the remembering, understanding, and applying. As a matter of fact, in most classes, it's very difficult, especially freshman and sophomore level courses, to get past the applying, because we're just so busy in most cases trying to get the information into the students' notebooks and have them regurgitate that 3 or 4 times throughout the semester. That's just the nature of how things are done most of the time. But this gives us an opportunity now to get to the top levels of Bloom's, where students are having to evaluate and create, because all of those things that you're talking about, I can have students generate or go out there to AI and get responses to a prompt and literally evaluate tens, hundreds of them if I want them to, because they can be generated so quickly, much more quickly than they could actually generate them themselves. So there's an opportunity for us to really refocus our courses so that our students are spending the majority of the time on the parts of the course we want them to spend their time on, and that's evaluating and creating. So we can have students compare AI versions with original ideas. So one good activity would be, okay, students, you write or do something on your own. Now you generate that from AI and compare and contrast. What was better? What was worse? How might you be able to redirect the AI to give you a better result? And spend some time on that, because that's what the jobs of the future are going to look like. We talked about providing opportunities for students to evaluate AI output. So really making this a part of your courses. You know, here are some outputs from AI. These are the typical things that you might get. Evaluate those. Are they good? They're bad? What's positive? What's negative? But remember that regardless of what we want to do, AI is here to stay. It's helping you drive your cars. It's helping you find restaurants on your phone. It's helping you do all kinds of things. Turn on your lights. Schedule when your TV shows are going to be recorded. It's everywhere. It is not going anywhere. So we need to act like it's going to be here forever. And so we want to embrace it. We don't want to ban it. We don't want to bury it. We want to embrace it, however that means for you, but we want to embrace it. And so hopefully now this is a better representation of how you feel. If you remember my first slide, it didn't look like this. This is a picture of an AI in a classroom interacting with students and helping them. I had that image before, which was a battle between AI and education. which is very different than this one, where we're working in conjunction with the AI to help our students learn better. So I thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm surprised that you all didn't have something better to do at 12 o'clock on a Friday, but I'm glad you chose to spend a little time with me. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And then hopefully you will join us next week. I will actually be there with you all next Friday, and we'll go ahead and get our hands dirty. So we'll have some activities where you all will actually get to play with some AI. And if you'd like to contact me in between now and then or anytime in the future, there's my contact information. So I'm happy to take any questions now. Thank you very much.